This video is made possible by the lovely people over on my Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel or you want to get your hands on some awesome high quality STLs, then please visit patreon.com/Will at Heroic Studios. So, you want to learn how to print with wood filament. You might have gave it a couple tries, didn't really come out all that great. Well, I got a few tips and tricks that you're going to want to see and maybe even work out for yourself to get awesome prints using wood filament. So let's get into it. Now, if you're new to 3D printing, you must know that there are a lot of types of filament out there, not just PLA. You have wood filament, you have carbon fiber, glow in the dark, special glittery filament, translucent filament, neon filament, nylon filament, PETG, all this stuff. So there's a lot that goes into 3D printing. You can print with different kinds of material, and that's pretty cool. But you also have to understand that the settings you use for PLA are not the same settings that you have to use for these various other filaments. The kind of filament that I've seen lately have been wood filament. People have been doing some really cool stuff with wood, and it's not actual wood. I would say that it is wood-like because it does have little wood particles in the filament that gives it the wood appearance and stuff like that. And you can really do some cool stuff wet sanding it down, making it look like polished hard wood. There are different types of wood filament too. There's like lighter wood, there's darker wood, and some other stuff out there that I haven't really looked into or investigated, but there's some pretty cool types of wood filament out there. So I've tried using wood filament in the past and have run into a lot of issues. I shelved stuff, I didn't want to touch it until I saw some interesting posts on some of the Facebook groups that I'm part of, and wanted to try and make this work. So I looked into how to make this happen, and I got some tips and tricks that I think you're going to like. And there's 3 ones in particular that really helped me, and they might help you. So I'm going to jump into it. But first, I'm going to show you what I did first in order to kind of get you understanding what you don't do with wood filament. So let's jump into that. So this first Majora's Mask came out pretty stringy. Now, I had the settings set at no retractions, but this is what no retraction does. So I ended up doing it again with 0.5 millimeter retraction, and this is what I'm getting. No stringing at all. Maybe a little bit there on that one thorn, but as opposed to what it was before, hey, this is much, much better. Here's what I did first. I got this Majora's Mask prop from Thingiverse, and if you want to print one, go ahead. Link is in the description for those who want it. And I was told that, you know, in order to avoid stringing, because this stuff strings a lot, in order to avoid that, maybe turn off your retraction settings. So that's what I did. And the results were less than stellar. I wasn't really a fan of turning off the retraction settings. So I actually went back to the drawing board, did a little investigating, and this is what I came up with. So here are 3 things that you need to know in order to print with wood filament. All right. Rule number 1 is that direct drive printers are your friend. Okay. Now I know a lot of the newer printers like the Cobra Max or like a Chiron or like a Ender 3, they come with what's called a Bowden tube. Bowden tubes are not direct drives. You have the extruder here and you have the nozzle down here. So the extruder feeds the filament through until it gets to the nozzle and puts it through. A direct drive printer is actually different, where the extruder is actually on the hot end and the filament goes straight through, all the way through the nozzle. This is more ideal for more specialty filament because your retraction settings, which we're going to get into next, are going to influence how much filament is sucked up and sucked down. Okay, so direct drives are really, really good when it comes to using specialty filament. It could be nylon, it could be PETG, it can be TPU, it can be wood, it can be whatever you want. I prefer using my Sidewinder. I was trying to say artillery Sidewinder. My Sidewinder printer, because that is a direct drive printer, as well as my ANET. That is also a direct drive printer. And these things specialize in working with specialty filament. Now, it is not written in stone that you have to use a direct drive printer to work with specialty filament. It is a plus, it does make it easier, but you can work with Bowden tube printers to work with specialty filament, and those settings are going to be different. All right, so that was number one. Direct drive, they're your friends. Number two, make sure that you go from your standard brass nozzle over to a hardened steel nozzle. This filament would have, like what I said before, wood particles in it, meaning there's little bits and pieces of wood that are in here. And what that does is that over time, if you're using a soft metal like brass, the abrasive material that's in here is going to destroy your nozzle. So you want to go ahead and upgrade your nozzle to a hardened steel nozzle. Now for my artillery sidewinder, that uses a volcano head, I think a V6 nozzle. So I had to swap out the original one and get a hardened steel one. But it doesn't stop there. Most printers come standard with a 0.4 nozzle. You want to kind of sort of up that nozzle diameter to maybe a 0.6 or a 0.8, because it goes back to the particles that are in this specialty filament. They do clog your printers, and it happens very, very fast, whether you're using a Bowden tube printer or a direct drive printer. Make sure that you are kind of using something 0.6 or 0.8. You're not going to get super clean resolution with a 0.6 because it is a bigger nozzle, but you're kind of tempting fate if you're going to use a 0.6. Now I'm not saying, a 0.4, but I'm not saying that you can't use a 0.4. Go for it. I've done it. I've done it on one of the smaller Majora's Mask. But if you're looking to print something that's a bit bigger like this, then you're going to have some problems and you're, like I said, tempting fate. Here is a smaller Majora's Mask that came out looking great, no stringing, and this was done on a 0.4 nozzle on my artillery sidewinder. It looks great. I love it. This is really, really something that I can really get into. So, larger nozzle, hardened steel, those are your friends. In fact, you should probably upgrade all of your nozzles to a hardened steel nozzle, because, why limit yourself to just PLA? Put hardened steel nozzles on all your printers and make that happen just like that. That's what I would do. All right. So those are number two. Number one was direct drive printer. Number two was changing nozzle diameter and hardened steel nozzles. Number three is your retraction settings. And because you guys are so awesome, I'm going to actually show you my settings on what I did to get this like that. And it's not a lot. It's not a lot at all. I'm just going to go ahead and show you my settings for printing with wood filament. All right, let's jump into it. Simplified 3D, this is what I like to use. Now, this little section right here, ooze control, it's going to be your bread and butter. If you're using Cura, it's a little bit more or less of the same thing. All right, the retraction settings when it comes to wood filament needs to be low. Now, like I said before, when I was running my original Majora's Mask, I did it at no retraction, which means I just clicked that and turned it off. But I learned that it came out stringy because you can't really do no retractions, especially if your printhead is going to be traveling from point A to point B. So what I did is that I set my retraction distance here at a 0.5 millimeter and left the speed at 45 millimeters a second. Now, this is just for the smaller size. So if you go and print, you go and get this file and you go ahead and print it out, it comes at the small default size already. You might need to scale it up a little bit if you want, but keep in mind that the bigger you go, the retraction settings are going to have to be tweaked here. When I was printing the bigger version, there was some oozing happening. It wasn't as extreme as the first time I ran this, but it was there. So if you're going to do that, size up the mask or anything that you're printing in wood, make sure your retraction distance is up by maybe 1.5, maybe 2 millimeters, depending on your printer. Bowden tubes, you're going to have to go more than that. So the retraction settings here is 0.5 millimeter. If I was using a Bowden tube, I would go maybe 1.5, 2.5 millimeters of retraction distance. Just rule of thumb. You might have to play with it. Everyone needs to play with their retraction settings, but yeah, that's number three. That's the biggest thing that you want to play with here. Your retraction distance. That's going to help ease any type of oozing, any type of stringing, and get you the smoothest print possible. So and that about does it. This is my Majora's Mask. I'm actually going to be hanging it up like here pretty soon. I just need to figure out how I want to do it, but I'm really happy with how this came out and it looks great. And if you really want to paint it, you can sand this down using lightly grit sandpaper, and you can go ahead and make this look a little bit more nicer and paint it to whatever you want. And it even has holes if you decide you want to add LEDs to it. So I think I'm going to do this whole project and just put it on my wall because I like the way this looks. I like how it looks like an authentic wood tribal mask, which is what it is in the game. So that's pretty cool. And of course I got my smaller little guy right here, which looks great. Can't really see a lot of the detail because my camera sucks, but that's what it is. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the video. And if you guys are looking for some STLs to print, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Will@Heroicstudios. There are my patrons. I don't know, left to right, one of these sides. Shout out to my patrons who have made this possible for you guys. So we're going into my 1-year anniversary of having a Patreon, and I got some pretty cool 1-year anniversary gifts coming out pretty soon. So go check that out, subscribe, it'll be great. I'll see you there. And also be sure to tune into my live streams that I'm doing every week. This week is going to be Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. So be there, be square. I'll be working on some awesome stuff that's coming soon to my Patreon. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you guys on the flip side. Check out. I meant to say check out or take care. I don't know, it's Sunday, it's weird. Bye.